Admiral Han Ji-woo stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Valiant, staring at the holographic display before her. 50,000 alien warships floated at the edge of their solar system like a swarm of metallic insects. She had seen many things in her 25 years of military service, but nothing compared to this sight. The Galactic Assembly had finally come, and they had brought an armada large enough to burn every human world to ash. How long until they reached the Mars orbital stations? She asked her tactical officer. At current speed, 18 hours, Admiral, the young man replied, his voice barely steady. Ji-woo nodded slowly. 18 hours. The Assembly had given Earth one final chance to surrender, to accept their terms, to become another controlled species under their so-called civilized protocols. She thought about those terms again. Surrender all weapons research. Accept Assembly governors on every human colony. Allow their educators to reshape human children's minds to be more compliant, more civilized, more obedient. The thought made her stomach turn. Across the solar system, on Earth itself, Ambassador Kang Min-ho prepared for the most important speech of his life. He had spent 12 years among the aliens, learning their ways, their languages, their customs. He had warned Earth again and again that this day would come. The Assembly did not tolerate independence. They did not accept refusal. Every species either submitted or was destroyed. Kang Min-ho looked at the camera, knowing that his words would be broadcast across all of human space and into the Assembly fleet itself. Behind him stood representatives from every human colony, every nation, every faction. For once, humanity stood united. People of Earth, colonies of humanity, and members of the Galactic Assembly, he began, his voice calm and clear. You have delivered your ultimatum. You demand our surrender, our weapons, our children, and our freedom. You believe we will yield because we are young, because we are few, because we are afraid. He paused, letting the silence stretch. You are wrong. On the Assembly flagship, the Archon Velthari watched the human ambassador with something close to amusement. The crystalline being's body reflected light in rainbow patterns as it shifted, a sign of satisfaction among its kind. Humans were stubborn, yes, but stubbornness meant nothing against overwhelming force. The Archon had personally overseen the destruction of 6 species who had refused the TVA Assembly's generous offer of civilization. Humanity would be the 7th. Kang Min-ho continued his speech. We have marked a boundary around our home system. We call it the line. Coordinates are being transmitted to your fleet now. This is our space, our home, our sovereignty. Cross that line, and you accept the consequences of your choice. Velthari's amusement grew. The human was actually threatening them. Threatening the assembled might of 400 species. Threatening ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds. This is your only warning, Kang Min-ho said, his eyes hard as steel. We will not warn you again. The transmission ended. On the Valiant's bridge, Admiral Ji-woo received confirmation that the coordinates had been sent. The line was now officially marked, a sphere of space surrounding the entire Sol system at a distance of 2 light hours from the sun. Every human ship had pulled back behind it. Every weapon platform, every defense station, every civilian vessel now waited on the human side of that invisible boundary. Do you think they'll stop? Her second officer asked quietly. Ji-woo almost laughed. No, they think we're bluffing. They think we're primitives playing at war. She turned to look at her crew. Make sure all ships are in position. When they cross, I want every vessel ready. Ready for what, Admiral? We're outnumbered 100 to 1. Ready to witness, Ji-woo said simply. Ready to watch them learn what happens when you ignore a warning from Earth. Fleet Master Grendak of the Assembly reviewed the human transmission with his senior officers. The coordinates marking the line were displayed clearly on their tactical screens. It was absurd. The humans had perhaps 500 warships total. The assembly had brought 50,000. The humans had primitive fusion drives. The assembly had mastered gravity manipulation. The humans had barely left their own solar system. The assembly ruled half the galaxy. "They are clearly insane," one officer commented. "Or desperate," another suggested. Krendek made his decision. "We proceed. Full speed. Cross their line and continue to Mars. We will accept their surrender there. Or we will bombard their colonies until they remember their place in the civilized order." The order went out. 50,000 ships surged forward, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. On a small stealth ship called Silent Observer, Captain Park Jun watched the alien fleet approach. His ship was designed to be invisible, to watch and report without being seen. He had volunteered for this mission knowing he might not survive it. The assembly had sensors that could detect a grain of sand at 1,000,000 kilometers. Staying hidden this close to their fleet took constant adjustments, constant risk. "They're not slowing down," his sensor operator said. "No," Park Jun agreed. "They're not." He watched as the first assembly ships reached the line. They crossed without hesitation, without even slowing. Why would they? To them, it was just empty space. Just another human delusion of power. More ships crossed. Hundreds, then thousands. The entire armada pushing forward, ready to crush the upstart humans who had dared to refuse them. Park Jun activated his encrypted communication link. "Observer to command. The assembly fleet has crossed the line. All 50,000 ships are now inside the boundary." On Earth, in a bunker deep beneath the Siberian tundra, Dr. Yoon Hana received the confirmation. She looked at the authorization terminal before her, at the single button that would change everything. Around her, scientists and military personnel stood in absolute silence. She thought about her daughter. Safe in a shelter in Seoul, she thought about her parents, who had fled North Korea decades ago seeking freedom. She thought about what freedom meant, what it cost, what it demanded. Dr. Yoon Hana pressed the button. "Project Threshold is active," she announced. "May whatever gods exist have mercy on all of us." In the depths of space, ancient machinery older than human civilization stirred to life. Captain Park Jun had been watching the assembly fleet for 3 hours since they crossed the line. Nothing had happened. The massive armada continued its steady advance toward the inner solar system, their formation perfect, their confidence absolute. His crew was getting nervous. "Sir, shouldn't something have happened by now?" His communications officer asked. Park Jun understood the concern. They had all been told that crossing the line would trigger Earth's response, but what that response would be remained classified even from him. He was simply ordered to observe and survive, if possible. "Patience," he said, though he felt the same uncertainty. On the assembly flagship, Arkham Velthari was pleased. The humans had made their dramatic speech, drawn their meaningless line, and done absolutely nothing when it was crossed. As expected, it had all been theater, a desperate attempt to seem strong when they were weak. Now the fleet would reach Mars in 15 hours. And this entire farce would end. Fleet Master Krendek was reviewing reports from his scouts when the first anomaly was detected. "Sir, we're reading strange energy fluctuations in Sector 7, a sensor officer reported. "What kind of fluctuations?" "Unknown, sir. The patterns don't match anything in our databases. They're appearing randomly throughout the fleet formation." Krendek frowned. Random energy readings were unusual but not alarming. "Continue monitoring. Notify me if they intensify." They intensified. Within minutes, similar readings appeared around dozens of ships, then hundreds. The energy signatures were unlike anything the assembly's advanced sensors had encountered. They seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, flickering in and out of normal space. Dr. Yoon Hana watched the data flowing across her screens in the Siberian bunker. Project Threshold was performing exactly as designed. The weapon wasn't a bomb or a beam or anything the assembly would recognize as a threat. It was something far more fundamental. 50 years ago, human scientists had discovered ancient technology buried beneath the ice of Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The technology was millions of years old, left by a civilization that had vanished long before humans existed. Most of it was beyond human understanding. The one aspect they had managed to decode: the ability to manipulate the dimensional barriers that kept reality stable. The assembly knew of the ancient civilization. They called them the predecessors and had spent millennia searching for their technology. They had never found any. Humanity had stumbled across it by accident and spent 5 decades turning it into a weapon. Dimensional rifts forming around targets, one of Hana's team announced. Stability at 87%. All systems green. Hana allowed herself a small smile. Increase rift intensity to Phase 2. In space, reality began to break. Fleetmaster Krendek stared at his displays in growing horror. Ships were disappearing. Not destroyed, not exploding, simply ceasing to exist in normal space. One moment a cruiser would be visible on sensors, the next it would be gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of twisted spacetime. What is happening? He demanded. No one had an answer. The assembly's greatest scientists had never seen anything like this. The energy readings suggested dimensional manipulation, but that was supposed to be impossible. The predecessors had mastered it, but they had been gone for millions of years, and all their technology had been lost, hadn't it? "Sir, we're receiving distress calls from multiple ships," his communications officer said, his voice shaking. "They're reporting time distortions, spatial anomalies, complete navigation failure. Order all ships to retreat. Full reverse. Get us back across that boundary the humans marked." But it was too late. The dimensional rifts had already formed around every ship that had crossed the line. There was nowhere to retreat to. Captain Park Jun watched in silent awe as the massive assembly fleet simply came apart. Ships flickered and vanished, reappeared in different locations, or seemed to freeze completely in space. Some vessels appeared to age decades in seconds, their hulls corroding and failing. Others seemed perfectly fine but reported on panicked transmissions that months were passing inside while only minutes passed outside. "Observer to command," he transmitted. "The weapon is working. The assembly fleet is completely disabled." On the assembly flagship, Archon Velthari finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. The humans hadn't been bluffing. They had been warning. There was a difference, a crucial difference that the Archon had been too arrogant to recognize. A warning meant consequences existed and would be applied. "Contact the humans," Velthari ordered. "Tell them we surrender. Tell them we will withdraw immediately if they stop this." But the communication officer shook his head. "Sir, we can't reach them. Our communications are being scrambled by the dimensional distortions. We can't even reach our own ships." Valthara's crystalline body dimmed, the color draining from it. They were trapped, isolated, helpless. The mighty Galactic Assembly, defeated not by superior firepower, but by superior understanding of physics itself, in the bunker. Dr. Yoon-hana monitored the results carefully. The weapon was designed to be precise, not destructive. Each ship was caught in its own pocket dimension, separated from the others, unable to communicate or coordinate. Time moved differently in each pocket. Some experienced hours while minutes passed outside. Some experienced minutes while days passed. But none were destroyed. "Casualty reports?" she asked. "Minimal, Doctor. The rifts formed around the ships without breaching their hulls." Most crew should survive as long as their life support holds. Good. Hana had insisted on that during the weapon's design. If they were going to send a message, it needed to be clear. Humanity could destroy them but chose not to. That choice was its own kind of power. Admiral Han Jiwoo received the reports from Observer and dozens of other monitoring stations. The assembly fleet was neutralized. Not destroyed, not killed, but completely and utterly defeated. She opened the channel to all human forces. All ships, prepare for Phase 2. Marine boarding teams, you are cleared to begin operations. Remember your orders. Minimal force, maximum mercy. We are not here to slaughter. We are here to teach. Across the human fleet, specially trained Marines prepared to board the trapped assembly vessels. Their mission was unusual for warriors. Provide aid, stabilize the ships, and deliver a message. Colonel Lee Taiyang led the first boarding team onto an assembly cruiser. His Marines moved carefully through the alien corridors, weapons ready but not raised. They found the crew huddled in their control center, terrified and confused. Through a translator device, Taiyang spoke to them. We are humans from Earth. Your ship is trapped in a dimensional pocket. We are here to help stabilize your systems and provide medical assistance to any injured crew. The alien captain stared at him in disbelief. You are helping us? After we came to conquer you? Yes, Taiyang said simply. Because we warned you, and you didn't listen. Now you will listen, and then you will go home and tell your leaders what happens when Earth draws a line. Engineer Choi Minji worked frantically to coordinate the dimensional weapon systems. She was only 26 years old, the youngest member of the Project Threshold team, but her understanding of the predecessor technology was unmatched. She monitored each pocket dimension, making minute adjustments to ensure the trapped ships remained stable. How long can we maintain this? Dr. Yoon Hana asked her. Indefinitely, if needed, Minji replied. But I recommend we start releasing ships in 48 hours. Any longer and their supplies will run low. Hana nodded. Agreed. We've made our point. Now we show them mercy is also strength. In his pocket dimension, Sub-Commander Rathanok of the Assembly sat in his quarters and tried to understand what had happened. His ship had been trapped for what felt like 3 days, though his instruments insisted only 6 hours had passed outside. Human Marines had boarded, helped repair their damaged systems, left supplies and medical equipment, and departed with a recording device. The recording contained a simple message. Return to your leaders. Tell them Earth keeps its promises. Rathanok finally understood. The humans hadn't destroyed the fleet because they wanted survivors. They wanted witnesses. The assembly cruiser, Infinite Glory, drifted in its pocket of twisted space-time. Inside, Sub-Commander Rathanok had watched his crew cycle through fear, anger, and finally resignation over what felt like 5 days, but was actually 14 hours of real time. The human Marines had visited twice now, bringing food, medical supplies, and calm reassurance that they would be released soon. It was the strangest war Rathanok had ever heard of. The enemy fed you, healed your wounded, and apologized for the inconvenience of defeating you. Colonel Lee Taiyang floated through the docking tube, connecting his assault ship to another trapped assembly vessel. This was his 7th boarding operation in the past day. The pattern was always the same. Terrified aliens expecting death. Shocked silence when humans offered help instead. And finally cautious acceptance of food and medicine. Colonel, this doesn't feel like war, one of his Marines said as they prepared to enter the next ship. It's not, Taiyang replied. It's a demonstration. War is what happens when demonstrations fail. They breached the airlock and found themselves facing 40 armed aliens, weapons raised and ready. Taiyang raised his hand slowly, his rifle hanging loose on its strap. We are not here to fight. he said through his translator. "We are here to help. Your ship's life support is failing. We can repair it." The alien commander, a massive creature with 4 arms and scaled skin, kept his weapon trained on Taiyang. "Why would you help us?" "We came to destroy your world." "You came because you were ordered to," Taiyang said calmly. "And because no one ever showed you there was another choice. We're showing you now. Lower your weapons. Let us help. Then you can go home and tell your leaders what happened here." The standoff lasted nearly a minute before the alien commander slowly lowered his weapon. His crew followed his example. Taiyang's Marines moved forward with repair equipment and medical kits as they worked. Taiyang explained what had happened. The dimensional weapon. The deliberate choice to disable rather than destroy. The plan to release every ship once the lesson was learned. "You could have killed us all," the alien commander said quietly. "Yes," Taiyang agreed. "But then you couldn't carry our message home." In the Siberian bunker, Dr. Yoon Hana and engineer Choi Minji prepared to begin releasing the trapped vessels. They had developed a careful schedule. Ships would be released in small groups, given time to recover and regroup, then allowed to leave the Sol system. "Start with the medical ships and supply vessels," Hana ordered. "The ones without heavy weapons. Show them we understand the difference between warriors and support staff." Minji's fingers danced across her controls. "Releasing first group now. Dimensional rifts collapsing in sectors 12 through 15. In space, 10 assembly ships suddenly found themselves back in normal spacetime. Their crews blinked in confusion as the dimensional distortions vanished. Automated messages from Earth appeared on their communication systems. "You are free to leave. Return home. Tell them what you saw. Tell them Earth keeps its promises." The ships fled, their engines burning at maximum as they raced back toward the line and safety beyond it. Admiral Han Ji-woo watched the first release ships escape from the bridge of the Valiant. Around her, the human defense fleet maintained its position, weapons powered down but ready. They had not fired a single shot in this entire conflict. Yet they had won more decisively than any battle in human history. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from one of the released ships," her communications officer said. "They're thanking us." Ji-woo smiled slightly. "Record it. We'll need proof of this for the history books. No one will believe it otherwise." Over the next 48 hours, Earth released ships in carefully managed waves. Each group was given supplies, medical attention if needed, and the same message. By the time the operation was halfway complete, the fleeing vessels had already reached assembly space with tailies of the impossible. On the assembly flagship, Archon Velthari remained trapped, experiencing subjective weeks in a pocket where only days passed outside. The crystalline being had time to think, to regret, to understand the depth of their failure. The humans had tried to warn them. They had drawn a clear line. They had given every opportunity to avoid this outcome. The assembly had ignored it all. And now they were paying the price. When the dimensional rift finally collapsed around the flagship, Velthari found human marines waiting to escort them to a medical bay. The Archon's crystalline structure had cracked in several places from stress and time distortion. Human medics worked carefully to stabilize the damage. "Why?" Velthari asked Colonel Taiyang, who supervised the operation. "Why save us when we came to enslave your species?" Taiyang considered the question carefully. "Because we want you to go home and tell them exactly what happened. We want the entire galaxy to know that Earth warned you, that you ignored the warning, and that we defeated you without becoming monsters. Fear makes enemies. Respect makes peace possible. The Assembly will never accept this humiliation," Velthari said bitterly. "The Assembly will accept reality," Taiyang countered. "We have weapons that can tear ships out of normal space. We have the willingness to use them. But we also have mercy. We also have restraint. Those are not weaknesses, Archon. They are choices. And choices imply power. In another sector of the trapped fleet, Sub-Commander Rathanok received orders to prepare for release. His ship was among the last to be freed, and he had spent nearly a week in subjective time thinking about everything that had happened. He had written a detailed report, not for his superiors, but for himself. A record of the truth. The humans had defeated 50,000 ships with a weapon that hurt no one. They had boarded enemy vessels not to slaughter, but to save. They had turned an act of war into a lesson about the cost of arrogance. When the dimensional rift collapsed and infinite glory returned to normal space, Rathanok found a message waiting from Admiral Han Jiwoo herself. Sub-Commander Rathanok, we have been monitoring your ship throughout this event. We know you have treated your crew with honor and have accepted our assistance with grace. We respect that. When you return to assembly space, tell them this. Earth does not want war, but we will never accept slavery. We drew a line because we needed you to understand we were serious. We released you because we wanted you to understand we are not cruel. The choice of what happens next belongs to your leaders. We hope they choose wisely. Rathanok saved the message. He would share it with everyone who would listen. Over the course of 1 week, Earth released all 50,000 assembly ships. 3,000 had sustained serious damage from the dimensional distortions and required extensive human assistance to remain operational. 47,000 were intact but shaken. The casualty count was astonishingly low, fewer than 300 dead across the entire fleet. Most from accidents or pre-existing medical conditions rather than hostile action. Engineer Choi Minji ran the final calculations as the last ships were freed. All dimensional rifts collapsed. Weapon systems returning to standby mode. Total energy expenditure was 37% of maximum capacity. Dr. Yoon Hana nodded slowly. So we could have done this to a fleet 3 times this size. Theoretically, yes. Though I wouldn't recommend it. The dimensional stress on local space-time was significant. Let's hope we never have to find out, Hana said quietly. The last ship to be released was the assembly flagship. Arkan Velthari stood on the bridge, watching Earth's moon appear on the view screen as the dimensional rift collapsed. The blue planet hung in the distance, peaceful and beautiful. Velthari had come to burn that world. Instead, humans had taught a lesson the Archon would never forget. Set course for assembly space, Velthari ordered. Maximum speed. I need to reach the Council before the other ships spread too many rumors. What will you tell them, Archon? The navigator asked. Velthari's colors shifted to a pattern that meant sorrow and acceptance. The truth. That we attacked a species we did not understand. That they warned us and we did not listen. That they defeated us utterly and then showed us mercy we did not deserve. The Archon paused. And that if we are wise, we will learn from this before we force them to teach us again. The flagship turned and began its long journey home. The last of 50,000 ships limping back to assembly space with the same message. Earth had drawn a line, and the line was real. The Great Council Chamber of the Galactic Assembly had never been so crowded. Representatives from all 400 member species packed the circular hall, their voices creating a storm of different languages and frequencies. Translator devices struggled to keep up with the chaos. Everyone was talking about the same thing, the fleet that had left a humble humanity and returned, humiliated instead. Counselor Ixthara watched the chaos from her seat near the center of the chamber. She was old even by her species standards, had served on the council for 60 years, and had seen many crises. This one felt different. This one might break the assembly entirely. Order! The council speaker slammed his sound staff against the floor. We will have order. The noise gradually diminished. All eyes turned to the front of the chamber where Archon Velthari stood, the crystalline being's body showing stress fractures that even medical treatment had not fully healed. Beside Velthari stood Fleet Master Kurenduk and Sub-Commander Rathanok, summoned to give testimony about what had happened on Earth. Archon Velthari, the speaker said formally, you took 50,000 ships to force humanity's compliance with our ultimatum. You have returned with barely 3,000 operational vessels. Explain. Velthari's colors shifted through patterns of shame and resignation. We underestimated them. Completely and catastrophically. The humans possess weapons technology that we cannot counter, derived from predecessor artifacts we did not know existed. They trapped our entire fleet in dimensional pockets, isolated each ship, made us helpless. The Archon paused. Then they helped us, fed us, healed our wounded, and sent us home to deliver their message. The chamber erupted again. Shouts of disbelief, demands for proof, calls for immediate retaliation. Ixthera remained silent, studying the three military officers. They looked defeated, yes, but also something else. Thoughtful. Changed. Lies. Shouted one counselor. Humans are primitives. They barely have gravity manipulation. They have something better. Rathanok spoke up, his voice cutting through the noise. They have weapons we cannot detect, cannot counter, and cannot defend against. And they have the restraint not to use those weapons to kill. He held up a data crystal. I have recordings. Every ship that returned has recordings. The humans documented everything. The speaker accepted the crystal and loaded it into the central display. Images appeared above the council floor. Assembly ships flickering in and out of reality. Human Marines providing medical care to injured aliens. Admiral Han Ji-woo's message about Earth keeping its promises. Ixthara watched her fellow counselors as they absorbed the evidence. Some looked angry, their pride wounded. Others looked frightened, understanding that the Assembly had just learned they were not the supreme military power they believed themselves to be. A few looked thoughtful, perhaps recognizing the same thing Ixthara had seen. Humanity had won this conflict without becoming the monsters the Assembly had assumed they were. We must attack again, one of the militant counselors declared. Immediately. With overwhelming force. With what force? Kurenduk asked bitterly. We sent overwhelming force. It wasn't enough. Send 100,000 ships, and the humans will just trap 100,000 ships. The fleet master gestured at the recordings. They defeated us without firing a shot. What happens if we make them actually fight? What if their mercy runs out? That question silenced the chamber. On Earth, Ambassador Park Soman prepared for the most important journey of her life. She was younger than Kang Minho, only 35, but she had trained under him for a decade. Now she would travel to the Assembly capital not to beg for peace, but to negotiate from a position of strength. Are you certain about this? Admiral Ji-woo asked during the final briefing. They might arrest you. Use you as a hostage. Park Soman smiled. They might. But I don't think they will. They're confused and frightened right now. They need someone to explain what happened, why it happened, and what Earth wants. That's my job. What does Earth want? Ji-woo asked. Recognition, respect, trade, cooperation. Park Soman's smile faded. But never submission. Never again. The journey to the Assembly capital took 3 weeks. Park Soman traveled alone on a small diplomatic vessel, unarmed and unescorted. It was a calculated risk. The message was clear. Earth was confident enough to send a single ambassador into the heart of Assembly space without fear. When she arrived, half the council wanted to imprison her. The other half wanted to hear what she had to say. Ixthera broke the tie by personally vouching for the ambassador's safety. Park Soman stood before the Great Council, a single human facing 400 species. She did not bow. She did not apologize. She simply spoke the truth. 3 years ago, Earth detected your fleet assembling. We knew you were preparing to attack us. We sent diplomatic messages. We requested negotiations. We offered compromises. Every message was ignored. Every request was denied. You decided we were too young, too weak, too primitive to deserve your attention. She let that sink in before continuing. We spent those 3 years preparing. Not because we wanted war, but because you gave us no choice. We developed weapons specifically designed to defeat your fleet while minimizing casualties. We could have built weapons that killed. Instead, we built weapons that disabled. Do you understand what that means? A counselor from a species resembling floating jellyfish spoke up. It means you are weak, too afraid to truly fight. No, Park Soman said firmly. It means we understood that dead enemies can never become allies. It means we thought about what would happen after the battle, not just during it. It means we are strategic in ways you apparently are not. The insult landed hard. Several counselors bristled, but others nodded slowly. Ixthara spoke for the first time. Ambassador, what does Earth want from the Assembly? What any sovereign species wants, Park Soman replied. Recognition of our independence. Respect for our borders. The right to defend ourselves without interference. Fair trade agreements. Cultural exchange. Cooperation on scientific matters. She paused. We want to be partners, not subjects. Equals, not slaves. And if we refuse? Another counselor demanded. Park Soman's expression hardened. Then we remain behind our line, you remain outside it, and we never speak again. Earth will continue to grow, to expand, to develop new technologies. Eventually, we will be powerful enough that you will regret having us as enemies instead of allies. She softened slightly. But we would prefer not to waste the next 1,000 years in pointless hostility. We would prefer to learn from you and teach you in return. Teach us? The militant counselor laughed. What can primitives teach the Assembly? Restraint, Park Soman said quietly. Mercy, strategic thinking. The understanding that not every problem is solved with force. She gestured at the recordings still displayed above the chamber. We defeated your fleet, but we did not destroy it. We helped your wounded. We fed your crews. We sent them home to tell you what happened. When was the last time the Assembly showed such mercy to a defeated enemy? The silence that followed was profound. THR arose from her seat. As one of the most senior counselors, her voice carried weight. I have reviewed all the evidence. I have interviewed survivors. I have studied humanity's actions carefully. She turned to address the full council. The humans warned us. We ignored them. They defeated us. Then they showed us mercy we would not have shown them. This is not the behavior of primitives. This is the behavior of a mature civilization that understands power includes the wisdom to use it carefully. What are you suggesting, counselor? The speaker asked. I am suggesting we vote on recognizing Earth as a sovereign power with full assembly rights. Not as a subject species, but as an equal member. I am suggesting we accept their offer of partnership before our pride costs us the opportunity entirely. The chamber erupted into arguments again, but Park Soman could see the tide shifting. Not everyone agreed, but enough were reconsidering. Enough were frightened. Enough were wise. The vote took 3 days of debate. In the end, recognition passed by a narrow margin. 212 species in favor, 188 opposed. It was not the overwhelming support Park Soman had hoped for, but it was enough. When she transmitted the news back to Earth, Admiral Jiwoo allowed herself a rare smile. So, we're officially equals now? Officially, Park Soman confirmed. Though half of them still hate us for it. Half is better than all, Jiwoo replied. We'll work on the rest. In the assembly chamber, Archon Velthari announced resignation from the position of War Council leader. I failed in my duty, the crystalline being stated formally. I led our forces into disaster through arrogance and ignorance. It is time for new leadership. Ixthara was elected to replace Velthari. Her first act was to establish a joint commission with Earth to study the dimensional technology, not to weaponize it for the assembly, but to understand it well enough to defend against it if the peace ever failed. Her second act was to send a message to Admiral Jiwoo. Thank you for teaching us the lesson we needed to learn. We hope to prove worthy of the mercy you showed us. 6 months had passed since the assembly fleet had crossed the line and learned what consequences meant. The galaxy had changed in ways both visible and subtle. Earth's solar system buzzed with activity as alien ships arrived daily, no longer as conquerors, but as traders, diplomats, and curious visitors wanting to see the species that had defeated the mighty. Assembly without firing a shot. Admiral Han Ji-woo stood in the observation deck of the newly completed orbital station Unity, watching a galactic assembly transport ship dock peacefully at one of the civilian ports. It still felt strange seeing alien vessels approach without triggering combat alerts. Strange, but good. Admiral, the delegation from the assembly has arrived, her aide informed her. Counselor Ixthara requests a meeting before the formal summit begins. Jiwoo nodded. Over the past months, she had developed a genuine respect for the old counselor. Ixthara had taken enormous political risks pushing for Earth's recognition, and those risks had paid off. The galaxy was learning to accept humanity as equals rather than threats. The meeting room overlooked Earth itself, the blue planet turning slowly beneath them. Ixthara entered, her form different from anything human, but her manner diplomatic and warm. Admiral Jiwoo, thank you for agreeing to meet privately. Counselor, what can I do for you? Ixthara settled into a seat designed to accommodate her species' unusual anatomy. I wanted to ask you something that has troubled me since the conflict ended. You could have destroyed our entire fleet. Your dimensional weapons could have killed 50,000 ships worth of crew. Why didn't you? Jiwoo had been asked this question many times over the past months. She gave Ixthara the same answer she gave everyone, because it was the truth. Because dead enemies stay enemies forever. Defeated enemies who were shown mercy can become friends. We studied your history, Counselor. The Assembly has conquered 68 species over the past 2,000 years. How many of them truly accept your rule? How many would rebel if they thought they could win? Ixthara's silence was answer enough. We didn't want to create another resentful subject species, Jiwoo continued. We wanted to teach a lesson that would lead to actual change. Fear fades. Respect lasts. We needed you to respect us, not hate us. You succeeded, Ixthara said quietly. Though not all of the Assembly has learned the lesson yet. We know, but enough have. That's a start. Across the station, in the diplomatic quarter, Ambassador Park Soman greeted representatives from 30 different species. The first formal trade summit between Earth and the Assembly was about to begin. The negotiations would be complex, covering everything from technology, exchange to territorial agreements to cultural protection clauses. But the most important negotiation had already happened. Earth had proven it could defend itself. The Assembly had recognized the defense as legitimate. Everything else was just details. Ambassador Kang Min-ho, now retired but still influential, watched the proceedings with satisfaction. He had spent 12 years warning that this day would come, warning that the Assembly would eventually demand submission. No one had believed Earth could win when it did. But they had not just won. They had won in a way that made future peace possible. Proud of your student? Admiral Jiwoo asked, finding Kang Min-ho standing alone near a viewport. Very, Kang Min-ho admitted. Park Soman has done better than I ever could have. She has turned our victory into actual partnerships. Your warnings made the victory possible, Jiwoo pointed out. We had 3 years to prepare because you convinced the government to take the threat seriously. Kang Minho shrugged. I just told the truth. You and your people made the impossible happen. Far below, on Earth's surface, Dr. Yoon Hana walked through the predecessor Technology Research Center with a group of assembly scientists. The agreement to share knowledge about the ancient dimensional technology had been controversial on both sides, but both governments had agreed it was necessary for lasting peace. The key breakthrough was understanding that the predecessors didn't fight dimensional barriers. Hannah explained to her alien colleagues. They worked with them, found the natural weak points, learned to open controlled rifts rather than forcing them. A scientist from a crystalline species similar to Velthari examined the ancient artifact carefully. We searched for predecessor technology for millennia. You found it by accident? Under the ice on Titan, Hana confirmed. Pure luck. Or maybe the predecessors left it there deliberately, knowing someone would eventually need it. To fight us? The crystalline scientist asked. To defend themselves from anyone who refused to accept no for an answer, Hana corrected gently. The technology isn't evil. Neither is the assembly. Both can be used for good or ill. We chose to use it to teach rather than destroy. Engineer Choi Minji, now recognized as one of Earth's foremost experts on dimensional physics, gave a presentation on the current status of the weapon systems. The assembly had requested this transparency, and Earth had agreed with one condition. The weapons would never be fully deactivated. Project Threshold remains operational, Minji explained to the mixed human and alien audience. The satellites are still in orbit around Seoul. The dimensional rift generators are still powered and ready. We estimate they could be activated within 30 minutes if necessary. Some of the alien observers looked uncomfortable. One spoke up. Is this not a threat to peaceful relations? Captain Park Jun, promoted now to diplomatic security, answered that question. It's a promise. Earth promised that crossing the line would have consequences. We kept that promise. Now we're promising that as long as our sovereignty is respected, those weapons will never be needed. We keep our promises, Captain. All of them. The uncomfortable aliens nodded slowly. They were beginning to understand how humans thought. Promises kept. Lines drawn and enforced. Strength demonstrated, but restrained. It was a different approach than the Assembly's traditional method of overwhelming force, followed by occupation. Colonel Lee Taiyang, now General Lee Taiyang after his promotion, oversaw the new joint peacekeeping force. Human Marines and Assembly security forces trained together, learning to work as teams rather than enemies. It was awkward at first. Trust had to be built one interaction at a time. Sub-Commander Rathanok, surprisingly, had requested transfer to the peacekeeping program. He now served alongside the humans who had once boarded his ship during the conflict. Taiyang had personally approved the transfer. Why did you want this assignment? Taiyang asked Rathanok during a training exercise. Because I need to understand you, Rathanok admitted. My people think in terms of strength and weakness, conquerors and conquered. You think differently. You demonstrated that strength includes mercy, that victory can include helping the defeated. I need to learn this way of thinking. And then I go home and teach others. The assembly needs to learn what you already know. That there are better ways to deal with other species than submission or destruction. Taiyang nodded approvingly. You'll make a good teacher, Rathanok. The formal summit lasted 2 weeks. Agreements were signed on trade, territorial boundaries, technology exchange, and mutual defense in case of external threats. The galaxy had other dangers besides the Assembly and Earth, and both sides recognized that cooperation made them stronger. On the final day, A ceremony was held to mark the formal opening of diplomatic relations. Representatives from all 400 assembly species attended, along with delegations from every human colony and nation. The symbolism was powerful. Humanity standing as equals among the stars. Ambassador Park Soman gave the closing address. She stood at a podium overlooking the massive assembly, human and alien alike. 6 months ago, we stood on the edge of war. The assembly came to force our submission. Earth refused. What happened next could have been a tragedy. Instead, it became a lesson. She paused, letting her words sink in. We drew a line not because we wanted conflict, but because we needed to be clear about our boundaries. We warned that crossing that line would have consequences. When the warning was ignored, we kept our promise. But we kept it in a way that left room for future peace. She looked directly at Ixthara, at Rathanok, at the assembled representatives. Today we begin a new chapter. Not as conquerors and conquered, not as masters and subjects, but as equals and potentially as friends. The line we drew still exists. It will always exist because sovereignty matters. But now it marks not a boundary of fear, but a boundary of mutual respect. We hope that respect grows into cooperation, cooperation into partnership, and partnership into something the galaxy has rarely seen: genuine peace between equals. The applause that followed was genuine, coming from both human and alien representatives. Later that evening, Admiral Jiwoo and Ambassador Park Soman stood together watching Earth turn below them. A young officer approached, Captain Park Jun, looking thoughtful. "Admiral, Ambassador, may I ask you something?" "Of course," Jiwoo replied. "Do you think we'll ever truly be safe? The galaxy is vast. We've made peace with the Assembly, but there are other powers out there, other threats." Jiwoo and Park Soman exchanged glances. It was Park Soman who answered, repeating words her mentor Kang Minho had once told her. "Safe? Perhaps not. The universe is dangerous and unpredictable. But respected? Yes, we drew a line. We warned them of consequences.